So we're going to get started. My name is Mana Ebrahimi. I'm a BCBA at First Children's Services. I provide ABA consultations in the public school districts as well as home-based ABA services for children with ASD. Today, we're going to talk about how to teach multi-step skills to individuals with ASD. It's important to keep in mind that all kids with ASD are capable of learning. They all have their own strengths and areas of need, and some will acquire skills faster than others. Therefore, all of our instruction should be individualized. If they're not learning or progressing with a skill, we need to reevaluate how we are teaching the skills. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So our ultimate goal is to help our kids learn the skills that they need to live as independently as possible when they grow up and enter into adulthood. Now that we all are stuck at home during this pandemic, I think it's a good time to work on some of these skills with them to encourage their independence. And hopefully with this presentation, you will learn some basic steps of teaching complex skills, and you can apply and modify them for your kids that you work with and use them to teach a variety of different skills. So where do we start? The first step is to identify the learner's skill deficits. This can be done through a formal assessment, such as a VB-MAP, ABLS, or AFLS, or it can also be done through informal assessments, such as observations. Based on the results of the assessment, you can establish functional and age-appropriate goals for your learners. And then you will want to collect baseline data to determine what the learner can and cannot do. You have to ensure, I'm getting some feedback.
If you could just mute your microphone, that would reduce the
So you want to ensure that prerequisite skills are met. And if they're not, make sure to incorporate those skills into your task when you're teaching it. Then identify your target skills. Does the skill involve a discrete response or a chain response? Discrete responses involve a single step with a clear beginning and ending. For example, turning on the light or saying hello. Those are all discrete responses. Chain responses, on the other hand, involve multiple responses to complete the task. For example, things like hand washing, getting dressed, bed making, those are all chained tasks. If you have a chained task that you want to teach, then you have to make sure that you identify each component of that task. And finally, you can select the best evidence-based teaching strategies to use. So what is chaining? Chaining is a strategy used to teach children with ASD complex behaviors by breaking them down into smaller sequential steps that are easier to learn than the entire chain. Within a chain of behaviors, each step serves as a cue for the next response. It also serves as reinforcement for the previous response. The goal is for the learner to perform each step independently. So that's our ultimate goal. And this can take a long time to master the entire chain. If you think about some of the clients that you work with or your own kids and where they are in terms of their skill level, you know, when you're teaching a task analysis, sometimes it will take a long time. And you can apply chaining to teach different skills such as daily living skills, social skills, games, and academic skills. So anything that involves multiple steps, you can really use chaining for. To use chaining, you first have to determine the steps of a task. This is called a task analysis. The number of steps involved in a task analysis will really depend on your learner's ability. Some children will require many steps, while others only a few. Once a task analysis is developed, chaining procedures are used to teach the task. And then ABA techniques such as discrete trial training, video modeling, prompting, and reinforcement can be implemented with the task analysis as well. We're going to get into all that stuff later. So again, task analysis must be individualized according to the learner's age, their skill level, and prior experience to the tasks. So how do you do a task analysis? Well, the best way is to actually do it yourself. So complete the task yourself or watch someone else perform the task. Record the steps that are involved. Go through the steps with another person. So if you are teaching a task analysis at school, make sure you review the steps with a colleague, or if you're a parent, review it with your significant others to make sure you're not missing anything. And then once you do that, you can observe your learner perform the task and then collect baseline data to see what steps can they do and what steps they can't do. Once the implementation begins, the task analysis may need to be revised to address any additional needs. So for example, if your learner is stuck in one step, you might want to break that down further. So this is okay. You can definitely modify your steps as needed. It's important that all steps are operationally defined so that if there's multiple people running the program, they all know exactly what they need to do. So it just ensures consistency. So this is an example of a task analysis for washing hands. Again, the steps involved in a task analysis can be different for different kids. It could be different if you're doing it in different settings. For example, you're teaching washing hands in a classroom versus at home. It could look different. Now in the time of COVID, you might want to make sure that you break it down even further. So for example, for rubbing your hands together, you can really break that down on what it actually looks like, how you need to do it. And first you need to, wash the palms of your hands, then you do the back of your hands, then you do the middle, in between your fingers, then you do your nails. So all that kind of stuff, you can actually break it down and teach. So another example is the task analysis for toothbrushing. As you can see, there are like a lot of steps involved, so this could take a long time for some of our learners to master each step. And sometimes what happens is when you're doing the whole chain, they will pick up some steps. So you don't really necessarily need to teach every single step. They might be able to learn when you're trying to prompt them through it. They might pick up some steps here and there. So it will actually, it's helpful when you're repeating it over and over. So once the task analysis is developed, chaining procedures are used to teach the task. There are three different types of chaining that you can use. There's forward chaining, backward chaining, and total task chaining. So in forward chaining, what you do is you teach the first step in the task analysis. And then you would reinforce with every new step taught. So first, when you're working on the first step, you would reinforce them for completing that step. And if you add another step, you would reinforce after completing the first and the second. And you would complete the rest of the steps for prompt it. Initial steps are, this is usually done when the initial steps of a task analysis are easier for the learner to do. So for example, if you're teaching hand washing, they can do, they can turn on the faucet by themselves and wet their hands. Those two they can do independently. So you might want to start using the forward chaining. So this is an example of forward chaining. I'm playing the video. Sick. You guys can't see the video, right?
No, I can't.
Oh, no, we can't see it.
I don't know why it's not allowing me to play. Is it maybe because we're recording? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. I'm looking at the settings to see if there's something off.
Yesterday.
Yeah, if you want to go on, I can see if I can.
Let me see if it works now. Hold on. Maybe I should do it this way. Let's see. No, for some reason it's not allowing me. It could be because we're recording.
Shouldn't be an issue, but let me see if I might be able to bring it up. I have your presentation too. Sorry, 1 minute. World's slowest computer. I'm going to move on to the next thing. I can see if I can open this.
Okay, so let's just jump on to backward chaining. So backward chaining is the opposite. You would teach the last step first and then reinforce the ending of the chain. And then you would complete all the steps for the learner or prompt them through it except for the final step. One of the advantages of doing backward chaining is that it allows the learner to be reinforced immediately after the task is complete. Also, when you're doing a backward chaining, let's say your task analysis involves 6 steps and the learner has already mastered step 5 and 6. When you're teaching step 4, they already know the final 2 steps of the chain, so it just gets easier for them as they know those steps. Any luck? No?
No. It looks like
The only difference was we weren't recording, so it was.
I'll stop recording and see what happens. Let's see.
And I have like examples for each different one. It's a shame that it's not playing. Okay, so which chaining method to use? It really depends. You would have to assess your task analysis and assess where your learner is at with each step. So if they know some of the steps and need assistance with others, then you would pick total task chaining. If they're good at the final steps of the chain, you can choose a backward chaining. If they know the first steps of the chain and those are easier for them, you can start with forward chaining. So once you have your task analysis and you decide on what type of chaining procedures you want to use, then it's time to, do you see my screen now or no?
No,
Is someone sharing their screen?
it actually looks like mine. Hold on, let me get out of that. I apologize. Somehow it showed my screen when I was trying to change the settings. There you go.
Okay, so there are two main ABA techniques that we use to teach a task analysis, and those include prompting and reinforcement. So prompts are used to increase the likelihood that the learner will provide a desired response. Prompt fading is gradually reducing the prompts. And there are many different types of prompts. They can be given individually or multiple prompts can be combined into a package. The most common types of prompts are gestural, visual, verbal, physical, and modeling. This is a prompt hierarchy. If you think about this as a pyramid, you see like the bottom ones are the ones that are more invasive. So those are the physical, then you go into modeling, visual, gestural, and verbal. So as you go up this pyramid, that's how you do, you go from most to least prompts. And then going down, we're going from least to most prompts. So how much to prompt when you're teaching a stack? It really depends again on your learner. For the ones who lack the necessary skills to complete a task, you would use a most to least prompting technique. That will provide the most invasive form of prompting first and then fade into lower levels of prompts as the learner masters the skill. Least to most prompting is used for learners who demonstrate the prerequisite skills necessary to complete the task, but are not performing the task. So they know some of these skills, but they're for whatever reason they're not performing the task. So you don't want to go in right away with a hand over hand prompt. You might want to gently touch the elbows to see if they will engage in the behavior, and then gradually, if they're not responding, then you can increase the invasiveness of the prompt, and then go in with like a more full physical prompts. So one thing to keep in mind is, again, ultimately we want our kids to be able to complete these tasks independently. That's the goal. So we have to think about, when we're teaching, what types of prompts can we use and can we fade more quickly. So some of the prompts, like verbal prompting, gestural prompting, it's a little bit harder for those to be faded. Whereas when you're prompting a child from behind and you're just guiding them using physical prompts, it's easier to fade those prompts out, especially if you're teaching like daily living skills. Again, the end goal is for them to be independent, to feel sense that they're doing it by themselves. If you're standing and giving them verbal cues, they might become dependent on us being there to provide those cues. You can also think about how you want to maybe pair some of the prompts together or put them together. So you can use a visual and a physical prompt initially when you're teaching a new skill. And then gradually, when you fade out your physical prompts, you can leave the visuals there for the student to be able to follow the steps independently. So this is an example of a visual prompt for hand washing. And with visual prompts, you can really be creative. It all depends on how your students are, if they can read. If not, you can just have the pictures on. You know, you can also use you know, you can incorporate, in this example, you can incorporate a reinforcement system with your visual task analysis, and they can earn check marks or tokens for completing each step. This is another example of a task analysis for stocking merchandise in a supermarket, used for teaching vocational skills. So, task analysis are really helpful when you're teaching vocational skills, because there are usually a lot of steps involved in those, and you can also, again, teach them to independently follow the visuals and complete each step, and then, you know, put a check mark. Again, here I did have a video showing how to use the visual prompts. So now we're gonna talk about reinforcement. Reinforcement involves the consequences that increases the likelihood that the behavior will occur again. Just with teaching any skill, reinforcement is key. When teaching new skills, reinforce every time without how much and how often you're reinforcing the behavior. Eventually, you will only reinforce the completion of the chain, and then gradually only use natural reinforcers at the very end. So, for example, when you're working on tying shoelaces, once they complete the task, you can have them go outside and play. That would be a good natural reinforcer. Or if you're teaching how to bake cookies, you get to eat them at the end when they're done. So this is the best reinforcer to use when you are actually teaching these task analyses. So whenever possible, that will be a good way to reinforce. You might need to put in additional reinforcement in the beginning when you're teaching. So for every step, you might need to, for some kids, again, depends on the learners. It's all individual reinforcement versus some other kids, they don't need as much. So always keep your learner in mind and see what types of reinforcement works for them. You could use social praise, you could use edibles, toys, activities, tokens, or natural reinforcers. The schedule reinforcement that you will decide to use, again, in the beginning, if they don't have any of the skills, you want to use a more like a thicker schedule, which could be a fixed ratio. So for example, a fixed ratio of reinforcement is you deliver reinforcement after every response, if it's a fixed ratio of 1. If it's a fixed ratio of 2, you would deliver after every second response. Then you would gradually want to move to a more variable ratio. So you do, on average, for example, a variable ratio of 3 responses. So you would reinforce after every third correct response. And ultimately, again, think about when you put in the reinforcement, same as prompting, you do want to fade those out eventually, so they don't they're not dependent on the reinforcement or the prompts. So some things to consider when you are doing a task analysis, you have to monitor the learner's progress, and this can be done by collecting data and monitoring how they're doing. If they're not progressing, you might need to ask yourselves some questions. Is the target skill well defined? Is the target skill measurable and observable? Are the prerequisites met? Do they need to work on some of these prerequisite skills maybe before teaching that whole task analysis? Another important thing is to ask yourself, was the task completely analyzed? So a lot of the times when you're teaching a task analysis, you get stuck on one step and the learner is not progressing. That's when you might want to think about breaking that step into even smaller steps, about how you can do that. And that could solve the problem a lot of times. Then you teach each of those sub steps, and then they will move more quickly. Also think about what's the appropriate teaching methods selected to teach. So maybe you need to use, forward chaining or backward chaining, and like you really need to modify your what type of chaining procedures you're using, what type of prompts you're using. Also, was the task analysis used with fidelity? So or if there are multiple people implementing the task analysis, is everyone doing it consistently? Are they doing it correctly? So this is an example of a data sheet that's used for teaching bathing. So as you can see, on the left-hand side, the task analysis steps are all there. And in front of it, you can collect your data, and all your prompts are at the top. So you can, in each box, you can say if the skill was completed independently, or if it was prompted, what type of prompt it was used. And at the very bottom, you can total, say how many independent responses did the learner engage in. So this is just an example. You can really do it in different ways, but that's pretty much the idea, how you could collect data on it. So when you are teaching a task analysis, another thing to keep in mind is that you need to generalize these skills, and you want to use different materials to teach the same skill. For example, if you are you're teaching a child to tie their shoes, you want to generalize the skills with different shoes. So use different articles of clothing if you're working on dressing skills. So to make sure that they know the skills across different materials. Also have other caregivers teach the same skills. So if you're at home, have grandparents do it, even have siblings run the program. If you're at school, have different staff do it to ensure that the learner can do it across different people. You can also teach the skill in several different locations. So if, for example, if you're teaching hand washing, you can do it in different bathrooms, in the kitchen. You can do the skill when you're out in the community, because it all is going to be slightly different. So you want to make sure that they can do this skill across different locations, and also during different times of day. So in conclusion, 3 things that will make teaching a task analysis successful. Number 1 is a consistency. So you want to make sure that if there are multiple people doing the task analysis, teaching it, that everybody is consistently doing it the same way. Number 2, it's individualization of the task analysis. So you want to make sure that the steps involved are appropriate for your learner. And the systematic instruction, you want to make sure that each step has been broken down into smaller steps, and each step is taught systematically. So those are the 3 key things that will make this a success. Now, and these are some resources that you can find some task analyses that have already been done, and you can there's some blogs, you can use these task analyses and then modify them for your own kids that you work with, and that's it. I'm going to see if there are any questions, and then I'm going to maybe try. We have time, Sonia. I want to see if I can bring up some of the videos. So I might have to.
I would try again. I changed one of the sets. Hopefully that'll work.
No, it's very strange because, let me see. No, doesn't work. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if I can bring the video up on using.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Just going through looking at the questions. Someone did ask me about certificates for Monday's webinar, and I have not sent that yet, but they will be going out soon. And yes, it might take me a little while to get the webinar onto the website, but I'll be sending that link out as well. And did anyone have any questions about the webinar. Does anyone want to share their experience on this topic? I apologize for those videos. We did do a run through yesterday and everything went smoothly, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm having trouble with it on my end. Okay. Can you, so we'll be sharing the PDF of the presentation. I just to be able to get the presentation into YouTube and our website to share that link.
Maybe, do you think it would be possible if we share the links, like the videos, like email them out?
Of
We
course.
can try to figure out a way to do that. Because I think it's a shame because it's so important, I think, to see how these procedures are done. And it just, you know, I don't know why.
Yeah, I'll absolutely make sure that one way or another we get the videos to you, whether it's a link to the original YouTube video. We had another question. Do the steps change drastically depending on the age of the child? Depending on the age of child one, if working with. I think that was specific, saying depending on the age of the child one is working with.
Yes, it does. I mean, sometimes like you might not want to teach as many steps or as detailed when the kids are younger. You know, it really depends on what their age level is and what is appropriate for that age level. Obviously, for like younger kids, when they're brushing their teeth, we don't want it to be perfect, you know, but as they get older, you can really tweak things and work on more details of how you want to do those steps, you know. So it all varies based on what their age is, what our typical kids can do at that age, and so on.
Okay, we had another question. Oops. Sorry, the chat keeps moving as I'm trying to read it. Is there a limit to the number of steps you can have in a chaining?
No, there's no limit really. As again, it's very based on your learners. Like if they need more steps to be able to complete a task, then you go through and you break it down even further for them. It's the goal is for them to be able to do it independently. So by breaking it down, you just make it easier for the students.
How can you do this via video? I have tried to use these techniques with the that is low functioning and nonverbal.
Video. I have to try it. So you mean using like using telehealth, you mean, or?
So, if Alfonso, if you want to take yourself off mute and ask the question.
Okay, so I work at, part-time in the evening. That's my second job. So I help, kids, and I have this particular client, and I got this client before before the lockdown, and he's not and he's functioning, really low functioning. I mean, the modeling in 3 weeks, I was able to maybe get him to like turn the water on and try his hands, and he really required like hand to hand and a little bit of, a lot of verbal. The mother seems to be able to do more verbal, and the care worker was able to do more verbal, but they have like 4 years with him, and the mother, had him all his life. So I'm trying to figure out a way to do this because they want to finally do this via video. And I'm thinking, how am I going to model it to this kid? How am I going to do it via, he's going to stare at the screen for 3 hours, This is what he does in the room. He just stares at the television, and I try to, in between bathroom breaks and whatever we have to do, is just what he does, and he doesn't respond at all. So I find that interesting.
Yeah, with kids, it's a lot of the kids we work with, they really require someone to be able to prompt them when you're actually completing his task. So it's like video modeling is not really appropriate for a lot of lower functioning kids. So you definitely, especially if it's a new skill that you're trying to teach, you might have to ask some assistance from parents. So you might want to try to teach them how they can prompt prompt the students doing the task. You can give them instructions step by step, kind of guide them through the, you can also provide, like, as a video model, you make these steps as clear as possible, break it down, show them exactly if you're working on washing hands, like getting dressed, all that kind of stuff. Like I had videos for all so you could just show exactly and say what step is. You can say the step and then show it at the same time. Actually guide them through it. They really need the parents in this situation.
Yeah, I was thinking about using props, like a doll to show their hand, I don't know. I don't see. You can't tell what they're thinking, and the way I look at it is that they basically just have a different wavelength, right?
Yeah.
They're different, or that they don't communicate. They communicate at a different channel, right? And we're just trying to find that channel to get to them. So I'm thinking maybe I get a doll and maybe try to show. You have to think outside the box sometimes when you have nonverbal, right?
Exactly. You really need to be creative and see what works, what types of and try. Don't be afraid to try different things. One thing might work and one thing might not work. So, just think outside the box, as you said.
Yeah, I appreciate the advice because I've never done it before. You could help other children that can discuss what's going on. But when you have a nonverbal, that's like the biggest challenge, like because you really can't fathom what's going on in their head, right? So it's like really difficult to try to come up with these ideas without frustrating the kid. You don't want to try 55 different things in one night. You want to just do it slowly, and have to have a lot of patience.
And that's another thing. Like, be patient. Each step might take a long time for them to master. And so just keep repetition is key. Like the more you do it, and the more you make it fun for them to do it. So huge when you're teaching these skills, because sometimes it involves a lot of steps, and it can become just aversive to them. So make sure you have enough reinforcement, is motivating, making it fun, and breaking down the steps into smaller, easier steps that they can do, and then reinforce the approximation. So you can really think how you break it down.
Appreciate it. It's good advice.
Other questions? Was there anything else?
I just want to mention, please write your name, chat your full name, and I'll send it to the email address you registered with. That we have some people call in, so they wouldn't be able to put it in the chat. Feel free to email you already with this link. So I'll take care of that then. today.
Thank you for the technical difficulty. I was not anticipating everything was working